All right, one of the last concepts I want to cover of our Unit 3 is the interdependence of the circulatory system and the respiratory system, as that is an incredibly important interdependence, so much so that we read our play A Day in the Life of, and we learned about how those two interact. So we're just going to review that really quickly in terms of cardiovascular/circulatory. Remember, those are the exact same thing. Circulatory and versus respiratory. And it's not even versus. You know what? Let me erase that because that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about interdependence. This is how they work together. They're best friends. They rely on one another. So we know that they're in the air outside that we breathe. In the air outside that we breathe, there are oxygen particles. There are oxygen particles that are just two little oxygens attached to each other, just floating through space. And we as humans, and this is going to be my beautiful human, we as humans inhale that oxygen into the lungs, where it's delivered to the rest of our body. Well, why do we need this oxygen and what happens when it's in our body? Great question. Once oxygen has reached the body, it's going to go to your tissues. Remember, cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. Our organs cannot function if our tissues do not have oxygen. Then the cells will start to die. So that oxygen has to be delivered to the tissues. And yes, I know that's spelled wrong. The oxygen has to be delivered to the tissues. And the way it's done that is through the red blood cells. These red blood cells essentially look like the little rafts, you know, when you go on a boat, tubing, and you're behind the boat and it's pulling you. And yes, that's a boat. It's going to be a sailboat because we're carbon friendly here. And it pulls the tube and you're like riding on it with your friends. Okay, that's essentially what an oxygen does on a red blood cell. It gets delivered to the tissue where that cell likely uptakes the oxygen. It says, oh, thank you so much for that oxygen particle. You're so kind. And the oxygen's like, whoa, bro, what am I doing here? And it's like, no, don't worry, man. Just come on into my mitochondria and it's going to be a really fun party. And in there, you'll find like lots of cool folds and sugar and other oxygen particles. And he's like, oh, all right, bet, cool, I'll go in there. And then the next thing you know, cellular respiration. Cellular respiration occurs. And now all of a sudden, that tissue and that organ has energy. So it's living, it's got oxygen, it's got energy, it's got sugars, it's ready to move on. But that oxygen is getting spit out as a carbon dioxide. It's now added a carbon molecule to it, and the body wants nothing more than to get rid of it. It wants it out of there. It wants it out of there. So, in our grand scheme of things, it comes in as an oxygen, which is very helpful and kind and lovely. But then once we use it, it becomes toxic to us, and our body wants to remove it as waste. Similar to the food we eat, after it goes through the digestive tract, and it's then absorbed for nutrients and removed as solid waste. The process of exhaling that carbon releases it back into the atmosphere. So now our atmosphere is made up of both oxygen, nitrogen, and now CO2. We'll get into why this is increasing and why that's a problem later. But our air has CO2 in it. And lucky for us, there are these beautiful little creatures called plants, plantae, kingdom plantae, that are just obsessed with CO2, and they would love to uptake that for us. So that plant is going to uptake that CO2. And inside of its chloroplast, it's going to do the exact same thing the mitochondria did. Ironically, the now oxygen particle, it went in as a CO2, came out as an oxygen. The plant now wants to get rid of that oxygen. that oxygen is a waste product to the plant, aka plant farts. Yes, we are dependent on those to survive. A human inhales it, and it starts all over again. The cardiovascular system is required to transport the nutrients that the respiratory system brings in. If that oxygen does not make it via the blood to our tissues, it's GG. Thank you so much.